In today's video, we'll be looking at another heavy hitter of Newgrounds, Mick Lauer, aka Ricepirate. Whilst most online know him from his animation work, as well as voice acting in various high-profile productions, his career in recent years has been tainted by an unfortunate string of controversy, including drink, women, and of course, power moves. In today's video, I'm going to attempt to document his online career, stretching from his humble beginnings on Newgrounds and work with Sleepycabin, through to his modern voice acting career, and of course the major drama he found himself involved in 2021. So without further ado, sit back, crack open a White Claw, and let me regale you with the tale of Ricepirate Mick Lauer. Mick William Lauer was born December 10th, 1980 in Woodinville, Washington State, to a Taiwanese mother and Irish-American father. His biracial heritage is what would actually serve as the inspiration for his later online username, with the Rice part being a jovial reference to his Asian half, and the pirate part being taken from his dad, who I'm assuming worked full-time as a treasure hunter or some shit. However, his relationship with his father would unfortunately be severed, as his biological father left him and his mum when he was only 1 year old. Over the course of his childhood, Mick would only see his father in the flesh a couple of times, with one infamous meeting on Mick's 7th birthday culminating in his dad gifting him the board game Trivial Pursuit.
Bad memories.
It's not bad. No, I met.
The place touched
I
my
probably
wiener.
already told the story. No. But like, I met him once for my 7th birthday. Yeah, and he came by and he already had a new wife and a new kid, and we went to like Seattle Center or some shit, and he gave me Trivial Pursuit even though I couldn't read, so I ended up just like chewing on the pieces. I couldn't.
Now that's
like,
a fun.
How the fuck was I supposed to know who the winning the pitcher with the greatest fucking the ERA in 1932?
Despite such a strained relationship, Mick, at least when speaking publicly, doesn't appear to harbour any serious resentment towards his biological father, even though I'm sure most would agree he has more than enough justification to be hostile. Both of Mick's parents would remarry, but it would be his mother's new partner that Mick would take his current legal surname from, that being Lauer. Mick's mother would eventually divorce his stepdad, and so he stated that in private he prefers to use her surname Wang.
But then after my mom got divorced the second time, I consider myself, my mom's last name is Wang. My family name, my Chinese family name is Wang, which is also Wang. So I just could never fucking like escape this whole fucking dick.
But it's likely due to his status as a public figure, where name recognizability is key, that changing his surname would be too much of a hassle to make it worthwhile. At 9 years old, Mick Lauer would quite literally have his life turned upside down when him and his family moved to Taipei, Taiwan. Despite being his mother's country of origin, this move evidently was far from a permanent one, with Lauer spending his teenage years moving around Asia, presumably due to his mother's work requiring her to frequently relocate. From 1994 to 1997, he was attending school in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Have you ever played rugby?
It's presumably here in 1996, when Mick was 16, his mother would give birth to his half-sister. During the latter half of 1997, he would be based in Japan, and from a select few surviving pictures of himself during this period, one can only imagine the vibe that was being a teen expat in late 90s Japan. You know, when you didn't have to worry about the economy. The next period of his life is one that's a little bit harder to comprehensively piece together. Most of what we do know comes from his self-written biography on IMDb. After finishing high school, or whatever high school equivalent he had after switching school systems so much, he would return to America and go to live in New York around the turn of the new millennium, to seek out a degree in performing arts from the Tisch School of Arts for Performance Studies, with a year abroad at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. I don't know if the significance of this will be lost on non-UK residents, but like, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts is the single most prestigious acting school in the country. To wind up here for a year, he clearly has some fucking talent. Upon returning to New York, he would spend a final year studying film and television performance at Stone Street Studio. Concurrent to all this, he would join an off-Broadway theatre company and pursue small acting roles, as well as participating in various small film projects. It was actually his involvement with stage productions that inspired him to begin learning graphic design, creating promotional media for his friends' plays and short films. Unlike many of his later colleagues who actively despised college or just didn't attend, Mick seems to have predominantly positive things to say about his time in New York. Actually, the most attentive among you may have been crunching some numbers and realised Mick's time in New York would squarely place him there for the events of September 11th. And indeed, Mick would unwittingly be given front row seats for the events of that day.
A guy stopped me in the street and said, "Hey, did you hear the towers got hit?" And I literally did not process it and just thought the guy was crazy. It's New York, you never know. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I went to the post office, I sent my package. No one at the post office seemed to have any kind of reaction at all. And on my way back, I don't know. I guess it's kind of like, things felt a little weird, but like I didn't really anticipate anything. I got to our building. I asked what was going on, and they said that the Twin Towers got hit, and I said, what? I mean, I guess like when they say it, you're just like, what does that mean? Like,
It got hit? Like,
yeah,
why?
like what do you mean? Yeah, and then
Yeah,
somebody's
I got
like,
hit by hackers.
yeah, or
got
something,
hit
and
by-
then somebody said, no, a plane flew into it. I was like, oh shit, that's fucking crazy. And they're like, yeah, you can see it from the roof. And I was like, oh shit. And we went up to the roof, and there was just everybody was up on the roof of the building, and they all had their phones out, and everyone was trying to make phone calls, and no one could get through to anything. But what was really creepy is that you're across the river, so you can actually look across into Manhattan, and you could just see like one of the towers and just like smoke coming out of it, and it was pretty creepy.
The iconic image.
Yeah, well, it was one of the iconic images. It was both of them were still standing at the time.
Yeah.
And only one was hit at this point, am I correct?
Yeah, only one was
Oh,
hit.
you got there before the second one was hit.
Yeah. Basically everything after the first one hit. So we saw the first tower go down. We also saw the second one hit, and when all that was happening, I just remember everyone trying to call people. And Stamper and I were actually talking about like post-apocalyptic movies where like, how do people feel like the world is ending? But the truth is, the way it really fucking hits you is when your cell
You
phone.
try to fucking call someone.
Yeah, when you try to call someone or your internet doesn't work.
And they're not in your phone book.
Because like all of a sudden you can't contact anybody. You feel
Isolated.
so
Small, very
fucking
small and
isolated. Like
isolated.
Despite such an honestly pretty traumatic experience, in 2001 Mick would begin to focus his acting talent specifically on the discipline of voice acting. He would be formally trained by Dan Green, a highly accomplished VA known for his work in various anime and Sonic projects, as well as actually voicing the main guy from the Little Panda Fighter. Oh, ain't that a kick in the head. And all this training went down at Edge Studio. I went to Gooners Anonymous, kicked me out for being too edgy. It would be in 2001 that he would land his first role, voicing Jin Ishida from the anime Prince of Tennis. He would finally graduate from NYU in 2003 with a bachelor's in performing arts. His graduation unfortunately occurred around the same time as an actors' strike, meaning there was little to no demand for new talent, and so for the time being it appeared as if he would be left without any stable route for employment. And that is the norm for every arts student after graduation. Luckily, his aforementioned venture into graphic design would come in clutch, as he was able to use his designs to assemble a respectable portfolio, and was eventually hired by a small marketing firm. As the internet exploded in popularity during the mid-2010s, the company would ask Mick to lead the charge into the unknown new frontier of web design. And so Mick, like any true art student, taught himself to code, and would soon find himself making decent money as companies all over the world had need of websites and those that could build them. During all this, his voice would continue to appear in a handful of games, even appearing in a few high-profile productions such as World of Warcraft and League of Legends.
My justice is absolute. Unbelievers!
It was also at this marketing firm where he would meet his soon-to-be wife, Alison Manecki. And in August of 2007, the pair would marry. From here, Mick would spend a few months travelling with an amateur theatre company, and upon returning, he began to submit as many applications as he could to acting and voice acting roles. He quickly came to learn, however, that this process was incredibly convoluted, due to each casting agency requiring different materials from applicants. It was this confusing process that inspired him and his wife to create Artist Upgrade, a website that would serve as a wiki of sorts for actors and voice actors, where productions looking to cast talent would visit the site and be matched with an appropriate actor or voice actor. Whilst running the site, Mick would begin to experiment with the animation program Flash. Originally as a tool to help market his company, but soon he would start to use the animation tool in his free time to produce animated comedy videos that he would soon decide to share with the world. On the 6th of June 2010, Mick's life would change forever when he created his account on the art/animation hosting website Newgrounds.com. The same month, Mick, under the name Ricepirate, would upload an animation parodying the game Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Unlike other animators who have a clear observable learning phase in their early cartoons, Ricepirate came out of the gate swinging, with a very slick and well-acted premiere cartoon.
Absolutely, I must.
Help me kill Dracula!
But, Master, I cannot aid one who opposes the Master.
From this first project, you can already see his heavy influences from anime, as well as his comedic talents presumably honed from his years of stage training.
If be you not ally of me, then enemy you be of my me you be.
Like, that's not even lol random Newgrounds funny, that's just unironically a well-timed punchline. By Newgrounds standards, to call Mick overqualified would be a severe understatement, and over the course of his career he assisted in the creation of countless collaboration projects and animations of other users. It was in the production of such animations that Mick was introduced to other notable Newgrounds users. In early January of 2011, he would create an account on YouTube.com. The purpose of this account, as with most other Newground creators' YouTubes at the time, was to serve as an official page to host his animations on YouTube, in the wake of other users stealing Newgrounds cartoons and re-uploading them to YouTube and reaping the profits. This way, if anyone was getting paid, it would at least be the guy who actually made it. His first upload to the channel a few days later would be ...
This game is so essy!
I mean, all you do is hit the spacebar. That's it!
A typography animation based on a hilariously scathing review for an indie Newgrounds game. As was the case with most other Newgrounds folks straddling YouTube and Newgrounds, it would soon become clear that YouTube was the far more profitable and sustainable site to focus on. I mean, just look at the views of these two animations and it's clear to see why so many migrated to the tube. That's what we called YouTube back then. Mick would consistently upload his animations to both sites, gaining a significant following on each, with these projects being a great way to showcase his voice acting ability as he continued to appear in various anime and games. World Feastable reference in 2014? He knew. Oh my god. He knew. All of this success would soon be brought to a halt when in 2014 Mick and his wife would divorce. And with this divorce came the end of Artist Upgrade. In his own words, he was essentially left to start his life over at 33 years of age. But Mick, not one to back down in the face of hardship, took this curveball as a chance to redirect his life in a radically new direction, using the connections he'd made at his Newgrounds side hustle to carve out a new career for himself in the unexplored frontier of online content creation. Later that year, Mick would move to Philadelphia, along with every other twat using Newgrounds. This is the third time I've had to use this stock Philadelphia footage. In Philadelphia, he would meet up with a handful of other notable Newgrounds creators, including Oni, Psychic Pebbles, and Stamper, and join their fledgling production company, Sleepycabin. In true frat house spirit, the new tenant Mick would be branded with the channel logo, revealing his tattoo to the world via his Facebook on the 24th of February 2014. The following day, a video would be posted to the Sleepycabin YouTube channel showing the process of him getting the tattoo. It's from the podcast that we would come to learn most of what we know now about his childhood, as well as his college experiences and pursuit of a career in performing arts. On the podcast, you could probably describe him as something of a straight man, at least in comparison to the drivel spat out by the other hosts. But behind the level-headed persona of Ricepirate, Mick Lauer was drinking more and more frequently, with his constant intoxicated antics soon catching the ire of his co-hosts. Whilst at first this was all behind the scenes, soon the world would be introduced to a drunken Mick Lauer. So in 2016, Chris and Mick, alongside a host of other animators, would appear on the animation panel for the Music and Gaming Festival, more commonly known as MagFest. The miscellaneous hosts for the animation panel had decided to have a drink beforehand. However, Mick clearly wasn't able to control himself, and by the time the panel began, he was acting obnoxiously and abrasively, interrupting audience members and the other hosts, essentially destroying the flow of the panel, as Chris tried in vain to control him.
I've got a Shark Robot page for some posters and t-shirts.
Yay! Mick, come on now.
Mick doesn't have anything.
Patreon.com/EmilyUkas. I only get paid when I produce.
Much later, Mick would attribute his drinking and resulting behavior on the panel to emotions relating to his ex-wife.
The reason that event haunts me, the reason that I will never stop apologizing for my behavior, it had nothing to do with my reputation. What I never got over were the people that I let down. My friends on the stage, the people in the audience, my girlfriend at the time who was watching on a stream with her company, the fans that drove from Texas, that kid with the Sans mask, that shit crushes me thinking about it today.
The panel is cited frequently as the moment when he was cast out of the core Sleepycabin friend group. However, there's absolutely no evidence for this, and it really doesn't appear to be the case. In 2017, Mick would appear on Chris's gaming channel, Only Plays, and the two would joke about how bad the panel was, speaking of it as a cringe but somewhat funny experience in retrospect.
And after the animation panel, me and Mick had a brief word outside.
Oh. He pulled me aside.
Mick said, "Hey,
you said no," and he said,
"Yes."
And that was it.
Mick said,
I said, "I quit."
Mick said, "You hogged all my animation during that panel." I said, "How dare you?"
It's not true at all. I woke up in the morning and I was like, I feel like I did something really bad. And then I go, "Chris, did I do something really bad last night?" And he just laughed. I was like, "What?" He's like, "You were hilarious." I'm like, "Why do I have emails from people saying you should be upset at yourself right now?"
I'm sorry, Mick.
Whilst the event on its own was generally received as a cringe but unintentionally funny event, it would become the first instance of Mick's drinking habits spilling over from his private life into his public one. Various accounts, most crucially Mick himself, state that around this time, i.e. following his divorce, his drinking would escalate from typical young adult liver abuse into fully fledged functional alcoholism. For the most part, this problem was very well hidden from the internet by Mick. Following the dissolution of Sleepycabin, Mick would follow most of the other members in moving out to Los Angeles. For him specifically, this move would facilitate a substantial step forward in his voice acting career, as he would land increasingly important roles, such as the beloved Ghost of Tsushima character, additional characters, and Mitchell from Hunt Down the Freeman.
You fucked up my face.
Again though, seriously, he did a lot of good stuff. Most famously, Leona Baccio in the dub of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Hey, pump the brakes for a second. I don't think this guy's an enemy. He's out cold. A random citizen. Go figure.
What? Are you for real?
I'm sorry, I know nothing about JoJo. Like, is this part 3 or some bullshit? Talking of JoJo, it was at this time Mick would actually create a fan-made JoJo series called Blood Sun Vendetta, using original characters to tell a non-canon story within the JoJo universe. To call this a fan-made series probably doesn't do it justice. This was by no means an amateur production. By going to ricepirate.com, you can find a behind-the-scenes video where Mick explains his plans for the series.
The lead protagonist being one Jose Hijo de Caballo, the 18-year-old bastard son of Stardust Crusader villain Whole Horse. Every episode will be released with an undubbed subtitled version for anyone interested in dubbing the series for themselves, and only ask that proper credits are given, and that, like the official series, none of the videos are monetized.
He would go so far as to actually take a trip to Mexico in January of 2018 to seek out inspiration for the setting of the episodes. Say what you will, that is commitment to a bit. Just look at his house, like every piece of decor in some way relates to JoJo or Blood Sun Vendetta. The man likes his JoJo, okay? You can tell this is a hardcore passion project and the culmination of his years of animation and voice work. His crazy dedication to the fan project would actually make him the subject of a bit of light-hearted needling by the funniest animator on the planet, Flash Gits.
And then there's Mick. We always thought he was kinda gay, but we never expected him to start making JoJo fan animations for 3 years. He's gonna be 40 next year.
He would appear fairly frequently at small anime conventions as a guest voice actor speaking on panels and signing figures. I mean, I think that's what you do at anime cons, right? He would even return to his acting roots with a handful of live-action roles, cementing himself within the Markiplier cinematic universe, with his standout role of the detective in Who Killed Markiplier.
It's time to get to work. Judging by the temperature of the body that I measured rectally, which is obviously the most accurate way to get the inner body temperature of a corpse. That's a fact, totally procedured. Don't tell anyone I did it. I am sure Mark was killed around 1:30 a.m. last night.
One final project worth mentioning his involvement in was Zach Hadel's Smiling Friends. As an old friend of Zach, he would provide voices for a handful of small characters for the show's first season.
You know, I knew Mr. Frog had problems. I just never knew they went that deep. Yeah, no, what you need to do is get your posture right. You need to straighten your back and be aware of your foot placement.
My own doo-doo feces, okay?
For providing his voice, he would later receive an invitation to the first season's premiere party sometime in the future. But we'll get to that later. All of this work would also coincide with an increase to his drinking. The reason for this, as given by Mick, is simply that the hypersocial lifestyle of being an influencer in LA enabled him to drink almost every night with no scrutiny. As Mick found himself drinking increasingly often, many in his social circle would gradually begin to distance themselves from him. The primary reason given for this was that his drunken self was largely the same as the one glimpsed by the public at MagFest, with him being rude and obnoxious and confrontational, eventually leading those without the patience to deal with all that to cut ties, at least in private social settings. This takes us up to around 2021, the period considered by many to be when Ricepirate Mick would quote-unquote fall from grace. I'm going to preface this section with no one can be trusted. The exact events that unfolded around Mick in 2021 and 2022 are so bafflingly complex that to this day even the most sweaty scholars of YouTube drama are still scratching their heads. The only accounts we have are from conflicting sides of the drama and generally understood to be highly warped retellings of what went on. I'm pretty confident after listening to both sides I've got everything down in a fairly neutral manner, but if I missed something or got something wrong, I apologize, and please feel free to let me know down below. But before we can even talk about the drama, you'll need a crash course on who exactly is involved. This is Veronica Gallardo. She's an online artist who had for some time been dating Chris O'Neill. However, their relationship had been sputtering for some time, and in mid-2021 the two had officially split for good. In the time the pair had been dating, Veronica had naturally made friendships within the Sleepycabin friend group that would persevere beyond her relationship with Chris. And one of these relationships, at this stage just a friendship, was with Mick. This is Smokey, aka Natalie, last name. A Costa Rican resident, she would move up to LA for a few months in 2021 to stay with a friend she had met via YouTube, who was in the same social circle as Mick. Veronica would allege that Smokey exhibited a negative pattern of romancing men in the hope that they would provide her with a place to stay in the US. And this was also the case with the man she was currently staying with. Veronica in a later video would use the pseudonym Edward in lieu of the guy's real name.
Smokey was a fan who'd become his friend. And at this time, she was coming into town to stay with him for 3 months, hoping to spark a relationship with him because she was in love with him. I'll call him Edward for the duration of this video because I can't imagine that he would want any part of this.
So sure, fuck it, Edward it is. Edward was also an influencer of some kind, likely a YouTuber in the same community as Mick and Veronica. Her obsession with Edward would escalate over the duration of her stay, with her mainly trying to break him up with his current girlfriend and get him to sleep with her. So now that we've established our rogues gallery of temperamental artists, we can move on to the actual timeline of what went on. So towards the end of Veronica and Chris's relationship, Mick would, according to Veronica, encourage her to break up with Chris. As an isolated incident, this is just a friend looking out for a friend and telling them what they think is best for them. However, when you factor in all the romantic crap that came after, yeah, this does become incredibly sus. If you tell one of your friends to break up with your partner and then they do, don't immediately become romantically involved with them. I think Lao Tzu said that. But in all seriousness, Mick would later claim that he was one of many who encouraged the two to end things.
But there was a number of mutual friends that had absolutely suggested it at some point during their relationship.
Pretty much all of their friends were telling Chris and Veronica to just end it. Therefore, framing Mick as a manipulator trying to end their relationship is an unfair accusation. Following the breakup, Mick would invite Veronica on a brief boating excursion in San Diego, as a purely platonic gesture. Somewhat understandably, Chris would interpret this move as an attempt to seduce Veronica, to which Mick vehemently denied. See earlier Chinese quote.
At the time, I didn't think I needed his approval to hang out with a friend. Yes, she was an ex, but frankly, one that he did not seem to want anything to do with.
The event, most critically Chris's reaction to the trip, would only serve as fuel for the two's smouldering friendship, with their disdain for Chris serving as common ground for the two to meet, gossip and drink. Whilst the two initially mocked Chris for his apparent paranoia about just two friends palling around the LA bars, yeah, soon they would become romantically involved. At this time, the Edward character would introduce Veronica to Smokey, and the pair would soon form a close friendship. Smokey would continue to pursue Edward, with little success throughout late 2021, and eventually Edward would leave LA, leaving Smokey without a cause. So tangential to all this, Mick would around the end of summer be gifted $1 million from a family member. Jesus Christ, that's some gift. The only gift my family gave me was temporary visitation of my children last Christmas. He would use this sudden windfall to purchase a house in Burbank, a house that Veronica alleges was purchased with the intention of her moving in.
He would later admit to me that he had bought this house envisioning that I someday would be living in it with him. I was not aware of his strong feelings towards me at this time.
It was at this stage that the two would begin to have overtly romantic interactions, although Veronica claims she had reservations about starting a formal relationship with Mick.
During this night, Mick would jump on top of me trying to make out with me, and I'd let it happen. Eventually, it would lead us to almost having sex, but because he was so drunk, he couldn't perform. Feeling confused and a little uneasy about all this, I drove home. Not because I didn't consent, but because I didn't look at him this way, and all of this was happening way too fast.
Veronica would then take a trip to Ireland to meet a character called Mark McConville, aka LS Mark, is a YouTuber most well known for his reviews of animation and pop culture. At the time, Mark was primarily based in Ireland, and during Veronica's visit, he would express romantic feelings towards her.
Two people who I had only seen as friends both expressed their interest in me romantically, making me confused as to what I wanted.
Truly, no one has ever had it harder in the history of humanity. Worth noting that before the trip, Mick would send Veronica a large amount of cash and her favourite cigs that weren't available in the country. Veronica, in her video, would frame this as Mick being overbearing and showering her with gifts as a manipulation tactic.
Like before I went to Ireland, he gave me $300 out of nowhere. I'd forgotten my Apple Pencil, and so he shipped one all the way across the world along with 4 packs of cigarettes because he knew mine had gotten stolen.
Eventually, Veronica would choose Mark over Mick, and this would prompt Mick to send her a massive paragraph expressing his love for her. In her video, she highlights him commenting on her hairy legs as a weird thing to say, but I would be more concerned about his final breathe. Veronica shot him down, and for now it seemed like the two had an unrequited but comfortable friendship. Over Halloween, Mark would come to LA, and would attend a party at Mick's house with Veronica on Halloween night. Now over the course of his visit to LA, him and Veronica would frequently break up for periods of just a few hours, clearly showing that at least at this time the relationship was far from stable. At the big Halloween party, Mick would get incredibly drunk, growing confrontational and pronouncing his love for Veronica with Mark in earshot. How exactly this went down is debated. Veronica frames the event as him being aggressive, whereas Mick claims he was just trying to be friendly, and his wording of the comment was influenced by the fact that Mark and Veronica had broken up and gotten back together in a very short span of time.
Later, I did approach Mark, and I said something along the lines of, hey man, no matter how long this lasts, you can always use my booth. They'd broken up and gotten back together in a matter of days. What I was trying to communicate was whether he was with Veronica or not, he was still welcome to use it. Mark, I could have worded that better. And honestly, at that time, you didn't need a reminder of your breakup.
Other minor incidents are also stated to have occurred during this period of drinking most nights, such as an incident where Mark would find Smokey laying down in a bed in the house and then proceed to lie beside her and cry about Veronica. She would give him a pep talk and the interaction would culminate with Smokey kissing Mark on the mouth, explaining it away as just a friendly little smooch, whereas Mark would say he was very drunk at the time and thought he was taken advantage of. Okay, let's take a quick break from the drama. At the beginning, I mentioned something about White Claws, and the reason is, in Veronica's video, she cites a custom drink that was created by Mick as the reason why they were always so fucked constantly. The drink in question is named the Mick Trick.
When we drank hard, because our poison was Mick Tricks. Vodka poured in White Claws.
I actually kind of want to try it, so according to Veronica, the only ingredients you need are a White Claw and some vodka. Any brand will do. Okay, so you crack open the White Claw, then you just add vodka. Just add some vodka. Okay. There we go. Let's see how it tastes. He was right, by the way. What Stamper said, everything was right. I don't know how he knew. Oh god. Yeah, all in all, solid 7 out of 10. In early November, Veronica would personally make the decision to end her relationship with Mark. The reason for this was that over the past few weeks, she had begun to develop feelings once again for Mick. The breakup wouldn't happen immediately though, because Mark had returned to Ireland and Veronica wanted to break up with him in person. Now you may be thinking, wow, this Veronica character really needs to stop faffing and just make up her mind. But let me assure you, she only switched to the Mick side because he was a massive fucking evil manipulator and she had no agency, okay? None. I don't know what went on in Tokyo in the 90s, but this man went bad. Eve! Veronica would nevertheless make the decision to pursue Mick romantically, and made plans to inform Mark that they were over for good the next time the two were together in person. And so by December the pair were officially dating, with public relationship posts and all. Oh yeah, to make things even more strange, Mark would return to LA and was frequently just hanging out at Mick's house, recording his videos and watching Mick and Veronica do coupley things. Mark, whilst initially supportive of the two, would soon privately express to Veronica his wish for her and Mark to stop openly showing affection in front of him, leading to, according to Veronica, Mark breaking down in front of her.
Mark would later tell me that he wanted me to stop being affectionate in front of him. He was the only one that told me how he felt, instead of letting stuff continue, like Smokey.
Smokey, on the other hand, wouldn't ask them to refrain from showing affection, instead just getting drunk and breaking down whenever the two would be together. All the while, she was still infatuated with the Edward character. This obsession with Edward, combined with her unfulfilled romantic feelings for Mick, would culminate in her self-harming, revealing this fact to Veronica in private.
Smokey would then ask me to go outside and have a conversation with her. So I stepped outside with Smokey, and she would say, I shit you not, verbatim, now I did something last night, and I don't want you to think it's because of you and Mick. I'm just a little depressed and I was thinking about Edward and I had a sad girl moment. She lifts up her sleeve, exposing her forearm covered in cuts all the way down.
The following day, Mark would visit Mick's place once again to use the recording booth and would see the cuts on Smokey, prompting him to take 4 shots of vodka. Around this time, the entire gang would take a trip to the Natural History Museum in LA, and I'll just play the clip.
I'd asked Mark, Strawberry Mage, Mick, and Smokey if they all wanted to go, and we all went together. Mark and I had a fun time joking around, but any time that we'd be giggling to one another, Mick would instantly come in and try and interject, to be a part of whatever we were joking about. There's a point where at the end of the museum, we all go to the gemstones area, and Mick would come up to me and be like, what do you think about that one? This was a similar type of behavior most men would do in trying to find the right type of ring for a woman when looking for engagement rings. We reached the gift shop and Mark and I are at the far end of the cashier's desk looking at some dumb toys when we suddenly hear, ma'am, I'd like to see that one. I rush over to him and I say, Mick, what are you trying to do? And I go and ask the cashier, please just put these back. I don't want them. To which Mick thinks this is like a funny little moment that we're sharing. But I look at this as another example of Mick trying to rub it in Mark's face that he has me.
Now this man getting a ring made out of straight ore. I love the discrepancy between the two versions of this story. It's literally Veronica saying his comments at the museum were weird, to which Mick's response is, no, they weren't, they were funny.
You know, the whole like, oh, are we talking about this? I mean, that is a joke. People know that joke.
So Mark returns to Ireland and Veronica over the Christmas period is having severe doubts over her relationship with Mick. These doubts would culminate in some hard talk from Mark, who would tell her that her relationship with Mick was paramount to her wasting her life, and she needed to take a long, hard look at herself.
And during this call, Mark would give me the most harshest and realest talk I've ever had. He would express to me that I'm wasting my life, that I'm drinking every day and doing nothing at Mick's, that I have all this potential and I'm not doing anything with it, and if I keep this going, in 5 years' time, it will hit me like a huge truck. I knew he was right about everything, and I tell him that he was right and I really needed to change.
If you tell one of your friends to break up with their partner and then they do, don't immediately then become romantically involved with them. Veronica would break up with Mick shortly after, and she would promise him that this breakup was in no way due to her having romantic feelings for Mark.
Whoa.
The next time the pair met, she told him she had romantic feelings for Mark, to which Mick's response was to tell her that he was going to engage in sexual activities with Smokey when she returned to visit LA in a few weeks. At the end of January, Mark, Mick, Veronica, and Smokey are all outside of a bar venue. Mick asked Veronica about her ex, Chris, and Veronica would respond by facetiously asking him about his old group of friends, likely those in the old Sleepycabin circle, who had distanced themselves from him after his drinking problem grew worse following the big move to LA.
Out of nowhere, Mick asks me, so, when's O'Neill coming back into town? Seeing as he was in Ireland at this point. Considering Chris and I had been broken up for about 9 months at this point, I was baffled at how he thought I would know. I retort back saying, yeah, wouldn't you know better? You've talked to so-and-so. Referring to the friends who distanced themselves from him because of his excessive drinking and how easily he would burst into arguments with them.
Mick would later state that at this time his loneliness was at its peak. With his friends gone and the woman he loved taken, he was left alone in his empty house feeling like he didn't belong in LA.
There was weeks I didn't turn on the lights. I felt like a stranger everywhere. And the friends I had before that I considered family, they were the reason I moved to Burbank. They were gone too.
This comment would therefore upset Mick, causing him to grow incredibly angry and leave.
He paced back and forth, not wanting to let this go, pointing in my face and continuously shouting at me, eventually calming himself down for a brief moment to say bye, and then came in for a hug. I would give him one of those half-assed pat-on-the-back hugs, which caused him to get mad all over again, shouting, no, you can't do that! After he walks away screaming, I don't have patience for this! Walking further down the road being like, fuck!
Later on in the night, dropping a voice note to Veronica explaining why he responded that way to what she said.
But I will say that pointing out the whole and entire friend group thing as not being a situation that impacted me to a certain degree, especially because they were the people I moved out here for, that hit hard. And especially if you were to ever assume that you didn't know exactly what I meant by that. The fact that it escalated as it did, that's a bummer. I really hoped that it wouldn't, but I just figured you understood better than most.
Listen, mate, I'm really sorry. I was talking out my ass for the entire night. I wasn't really thinking what I was saying. I don't lightly use the phrase brother from another mother, but I think obviously with you. This takes us to February of 2022, where we finally reach the iconic Smiling Friends party. As mentioned, Mick had voiced a handful of characters, and so he was invited along to a party to celebrate the mass release of the show on streaming platforms. He would bring Smokey along to this event, whilst Veronica and Mark would stay at someone else's house drinking. Prior to accepting his invitation, Mick would admit to feeling anxious about his presence there, being unwelcome, with many in attendance at this point now being what he would consider ex-friends. If you'll remember, Mick and Veronica first grew close the year before over their shared dislike for Chris O'Neill, who would also be in attendance at the Smiling Friends party. Mick would state that the full year of hating Chris with Veronica had essentially created an echo chamber, where the version of Chris he had in his head was a maniacal villain. Upon seeing Chris talking with a group of people at the bar, Mick would approach and acknowledge everyone else in the group he was with. And what followed is an event so legendary and shrouded in mystery, it would follow Mick up until today. According to Mick's version of events, he went up to shake Chris's hand, and Chris was so intimidated by this alpha gesture that he slinked away and spent the entire night alone in a corner, too intimidated to socialize. According to other unverified accounts provided to Veronica, a voice crack and some very sweaty palms would leave Mick the one sitting in a corner alone instead. Upon telling his story to Veronica, she would grow frustrated at Mick for this action, with Mick misinterpreting this frustration as her being angry that Mick was now trying to befriend Chris. Mick would clarify via voice notes what his intentions were, and hence you have the infamous recording.
The Smiling Friends party. It hasn't been brought up, but I have a feeling that was a source of some contention. And I specifically the I shook Chris's hand thing, which seemed to upset you in the moment. I wasn't sure if you were exaggerating how you felt at the time, but I have since heard that no, that actually did bother you. I don't know if you get what I was saying when I said I did that, and I just wanted to clarify that that was very much a power move, and I think everybody else understood that. I don't know why you didn't.
A few months later, Chris would reference this incident in a Sonic Heroes video, 9 months before the world would actually learn of what he was talking about.
Heroes read the 48 Laws of Power, and he kind of does power moves.
Yeah.
See this?
Just so you know, that was a power move.
What?
Nothing. No, nothing.
What was a power move?
Oh god, this part. That's fucking awesome, dude. I got chills.
It's unknown how he came to hear of the voice note, but presumably it leaked from Veronica and was spread around, eventually reaching Chris. After the power move debacle, Veronica would begin to distance herself from Mick and Smokey, dropping a long dramatic Smokey no longer my best friend type meme. Soon after, Veronica would go to a house party by herself. And here she would meet an old friend called Chandler. Fuck! This is Chandler. He's literally just some guy. I have no clue, okay? He's a Christian, okay? I don't know, what? Veronica would end up having sex with Chandler that night, blaming the event on being so drunk she literally doesn't remember a single detail from the night. Chandler would later claim that she was the one to propose the sexy time on him, and him being drunk as well accepted. According to Veronica, Chandler was the one in the wrong because he's a holy man and should know better than to be seduced by a woman in a relationship. Sorry, I'm not even joking. She literally says, I was drunk and I'm sorry if the drunk me wanted to have sex with this man, but he should have known better.
Chandler's a religious guy, so he's expressing to me how great it is that I'm seeking the Lord. This guy, who praises himself for his strength in religion, was fully aware of having sex with a woman who he knew was in a relationship. He would admit to Mark that I had told him that we were still together.
Mark and Chandler would have a little passive-aggressive spat on Messenger, Mark ending with, I hope you remember this so you never do it again. Jokes aside, Mark was very hurt by this whole affair, and shortly after would message Veronica that he wanted to end the relationship. Okay, so during this time, Mark and Veronica were fighting constantly, and allegedly on multiple occasions when fighting, Veronica would demeaningly compare Mark to Brian Griffin.
Poor little Brian Griffin. I'm not going to go into details, but it was a shitty thing to say, and to his face, multiple times. And I get why you said it. You felt guilty, you were tired, you were frustrated, and you reacted.
I don't even know what the fuck this means. I'm very interested to know the context though, so if anybody knows, please do leave a comment. Unsurprisingly, Mark and Veronica would soon start talking again, going on a trip to Ireland soon after and marrying in August. With this event being met with a mix of surprise and by fans and onlookers. The main reason for this mixed reception was the age gap between her and Mark, with Veronica being 8 years his senior. This was confounded by the fact that Mark's age at the time they married, 20 years old, is incredibly young to commit yourself to someone else for life. Likewise, by Veronica's own admission when recounting all the preceding relationship drama, Mark was inexperienced when it came to relationships and adult life in general, struggling to keep up with the drinking of his LA peers, most of which were around a decade older than him. In September, the two would buy an apartment in LA together. White people, am I right? And so the newlyweds would settle into married life, and Mick would continue to live in his home with occasional visits from Smokey. And so the ex-friend group went their separate ways, and the drama was finally put to rest. As all the drama began to die down, Mick's life would undergo another significant development. In October of 2022, his biological dad would invite Mick out on his boat for a fishing trip, marking the first significant interaction they would have in Mick's entire adult life. Mick would accept, so him and his dad alongside his half-brother would hit the ocean for what one assumes was a very cathartic weekend. Mick would post about the trip on Twitter, and it seems the experience was a net positive. It's unknown if the trip marked a newfound connection with his biological dad, or if they even remained in touch afterwards. But it's at least one satisfying payoff for Mick's story. Following this, things looked bright going into 2023, but this would all be turned upside down when knowledge of his private life over the past 3 years would spill out onto the internet. So in January of 2023, the YouTuber Just Stop would squirt out a now deleted video entitled LS Mark Dangers in Dating Reupload. The video mainly concerned Mark and the entire saga of drama concerning Veronica, Smokey, and Mick.
Have you ever been put into a situation where you weren't quite sure whether or not you should reveal a piece of information, fearing the consequences, but then it just kept getting worse to the point you couldn't keep your mouth shut any longer? Yeah, that's basically the current situation, and I'm not going to waste your time beating around the bush. This script's been rewritten too many times for me to ease you in slowly.
You didn't rewrite shit, you fucking liar. Mick wasn't actually mentioned by name in the video. His identity kept anonymous, but like it would only take 15 seconds of research to figure out it was him. The video was highly critical of Veronica, framing Mark and the others as victims of her deceit. However, it would be her response to this video that would provide us with most of the info we know now. The video in question would come the following month, uploaded to her channel under the name Escaping Mick, Smokey, and Alcohol. Reupload. This video is iconic, and I think this comment here summarizes why. The version of events as told by Veronica paints her in an inconceivably positive light, with her flip-flopping between partners explained as a result of Mick manipulating her, and her cheating excused by her being too drunk to remember anything.
I didn't like who I was. I didn't like that I was drinking all the time. I didn't like the toll it was taking on my body and my mental state.
Most relevant to Mick, however, was the reveal of the infamous Power Move voice note, with fans following the drama immediately connecting it to the Only Plays reference. And within hours, the phrase Power Move was being spammed all over Ricepirate's related media and the Sleepycabin subreddit. Aside from this, the video itself would be received extremely negatively, with Veronica removing the video after a few months owing to the negative feedback directed at her for her behaviour, and reluctance to bear responsibility for her actions. Mick was likely made aware of this video almost immediately, upon seeing people spam the fucking meme on his posts. After gauging that this wasn't the type of drama that would just blow over, he immediately set to work on a response, tweeting the day after Veronica's video that he would address the drama, and that her recounting of events was not the whole story, and certain details were simply untrue. The response to this announcement was overwhelmingly negative, with many of his followers either scolding him for his behaviour, or just making fun of him for being old and insecure. Nevertheless, a few days later on the 19th of February, Ricepirate Mick Lauer would release his response, simply titled Salute, re-upload as an unlisted video on his YouTube channel for anyone following his Twitter to view. In the almost hour-long video, he would go through the entire events of 2021 and 2022 from his perspective, apologising for some of the things he's done and correcting the record for things that may have been misreported. I'm assuming a lot of people are expecting me to meme on his apology. That's what I thought I would be doing going into it too. But after watching, I'm afraid to say, as YouTube apologies go, this is probably one of the best I've ever seen. I don't mean best as in he refutes everything and destroys Veronica with facts and logic, but he takes responsibility, for the most part. Going so far as to call himself a romantic cringelord, strong words. He effectively says he was unhealthily obsessed with Veronica to the point of mental illness. But he also doesn't do a boogie and just roll over and submit. He still defends himself over certain points made in her video. Notably the notion that he sent her cigs in Ireland totally out of the blue.
At some point in her video, she mentions love bombing. I'm not sure if it's this part or if it was the favors that I was doing for her. She brought up me mailing her cigarettes to Ireland. Dude, you hit me up. You were so mad about those cigarettes because I think it was close to the beginning of your trip or early-ish on, and you were jonesing. You weren't going to be able to get the brand that you like there. And so you asked me to send them.
Even the Power Move meme he owns up to and says it was very cringe of him to say.
And later when I recounted the event to Veronica, partially to probably impress her, her reaction confused me. She seemed annoyed at me, and I later found she considered my shaking his hand as some form of kissing up to him, which was frustrating considering that was the opposite of my intention, and I thought that was obvious. In my probably drunken attempt to clarify my intent to her, I very much dramatized the events and my language and my emotion and sounded not just like a dick, but a corny supervillain. This is my second apology. Chris, while I will always stand by the fact that I believe you misunderstood my intent of taking Veronica out on that boat, I should have been more sympathetic because you were my friend.
I'm not excusing him by any means. I think in this entire situation, nobody is innocent.
Doesn't mean I haven't said some shit, but ask any single one of our mutuals, no matter what I've said, I've always stated, I hope they work out. I hope the project turns out good. I hope his health gets better. I hope everyone fucking works out because I gain nothing from people failing.
The climax of his apology is him addressing his drinking, and on video he makes this announcement.
So, I'm quitting. I'm not sure if I'm going to do AA or what. I have a lot of good people around me, and I know they want this for me. So, for the sake of my old friends, my new friends, my family, but mostly for myself, this day seems as good as any day. I am nervous. You know, I've been drinking since I was like 15. And, you know, it became like part of my brand and reputation. It didn't age well, but, you know. I'm excited for a positive change, get healthier, lose some weight, save some money, make some better decisions.
On his Twitter, he would begin to tweet whenever he reached a milestone in his sobriety. However, these public announcements have since ceased, so it's unknown for certain if he's kept to his promise. Totally unrelated, later that month, Mick would make a Reddit post directed at Stamper addressing Will's claims that the other members of Sleepycabin were stealing revenue that was rightfully his. Looking at the comments on this post, it was actually refreshing to see commenters being supportive of Mick and expressing support for his sobriety and upcoming projects. After all that had happened and how controversial his name had become, there was still a dedicated community who held a massive amount of respect for him and his work, and were willing to stick by him despite everything. Over the following year, he would keep on doing voice work in dozens of animated shows and video video games, showing clearly that the drama had had no severe lasting impact on his reputation or career. The real damage can mainly be seen in how he's discussed online. Any discussion of Mick on a page that's not his Twitter will almost certainly include the terms power move or lion's den. And when speaking broadly, he's often compared to Stamper as the other member of Sleepycabin who fell off. But honestly, I think you could view this story as the yin to Stamper's meth-induced yang. Mick's story is one of a guy who's encountered hardship at just about every period of his life. Okay, maybe not every period. And spent almost 2 decades building a reputation only for it to be torn down within a couple months. It's one thing to have your reputation ruined by association with someone or vague allegations, but it must hurt extra bad when you only have yourself to blame. And in this situation, Mick was certainly not without blame. But after it was over, he didn't wallow in self-pity or lash out against the fans. He made a deliberate effort to improve and be better, or at least a slightly better version of himself. Say what you want about Mick, but he's doing fine. And whilst he's mostly stepped away from YouTube, he seems to be doing very well for himself, quietly working on Blood Sun Vendetta. I mean, holy shit, look at the quality of this animation, like, this is fucking insane. Man gotta stop animating JoJo, start trying to animate with some bitches. I guess you could call the resilience of Mick Lauer something of a power move. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm really sorry this took so long to get out. I've been very busy, IRL, but I still have loads more stuff on the way. Thanks for watching, it means so much, and I'll see you next time.